You all know me pretty well. For those of you who don't, my name is Benjamin. I am an OUSD graduate like many of you. I was Jessica's colleague on All City Council and then on the Youth Commission where I served as chair. I'm currently a UC Berkeley student studying civil engineering. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm now a candidate for school board.
Great.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. Do you want to take the remaining?
Do you want to just give us a little bit about why you're running for school board and
Sure.
what you hope to accomplish?
Sure. Well, as an OUSD graduate, I have had firsthand experience with the school board, with the OUSD governance, and it was not impressive. The district claims to support students, and staff do an admirable job of supporting students and families throughout most of the work, but they're hampered by a persistent amount of bureaucracy and red tape that just impedes the quality education that we're trying to offer to our schools. And I'm running because we need a student who is educated in these issues, who understands the finances and the policy and the state law, and who can actually serve as a voting member in the way that our two student directors just never have been allowed to do.
all right.
All right, first question is, OUSD is facing a budget shortfall. And to make matters worse, OUSD student enrollment is continuing to decline for the 6th year in a row. Oakland is operating far more schools than other similarly sized districts, which is leading to the inadequate resources supporting these open schools. What actions would you take to address these enrollment and budget challenges?
Well, I will preface everything that I say with the fact that I am not a budget professional. The first thing I would do across the board is consult the district office and their budget professionals who OUSD currently employs. Beyond that, there are certain common sense initiatives and goals that we can simply undertake. One of which is, frankly, analyzing the schools that are operated with far too few students. It's fundamentally unfair for schools to be operated with under average enrollment, because frankly, the overhead for each of those campuses could be redistributed and offered to every single other campus, which has lack of maintenance, lack of services, lack of staff. Redirecting those admin costs is itself a way both to balance the budget and to allocate funds to programs that I at Oakland Tech and Mellor's leadership saw were not being provided for. That being said, there are other issues that need to be addressed. State advocating for more state funding has to be on there. It's not a feasible option in the short term. It's not potentially feasible in the long term. It still needs to be a component of policy, simply because addressing and altering the local control funding formula in a way that allocates funds, for example, the double counting policy, so that students who are both English language learners and foster youth would get double the funds instead of just one when they are using services from both programs. That's a component. Personally, as a building scientist and engineer, I'm partial towards looking really closely at maintenance and management of our facilities. I've done that for Berkeley. In my research group and my lab, have found millions of dollars of savings simply by looking at HVAC costs and maintenance costs and capital campaigns. Again, these are all small components of a much larger strategy. And so frankly, combining a series of actions like building maintenance, like teacher retention to lower onboarding costs and to build a higher quality group of educators by increasing enrollment and getting more ADA dollars, and by, if necessary, looking into ways that our 7-Eleven committee can promote other developments on our campuses that generate revenue. Those are all components of a strategy that the board has to follow.
Great. Thanks for that. Next question. So Ben, we know you were a student in the district quite recently, and at the same time, you're now finishing college. lack professional working experience post-educational, in terms of or at least in a traditional educational setting. Can you tell us why you think you are prepared to take on this huge role?
Well, you know, the real qualification for serving on the board is to be a passionate Oaklander with a stake in the district. And I can say unequivocally, I believe I have the most direct stake in these schools because I was in these schools 2 years ago and I'm still in these schools. I go to Oakland Tech, I go to my local schools. I've tutored kids, I've visited my teachers, I go back because I care so much about OUSD. And that's the most important thing. It is simply to be, I believe that I'm a delegate to represent the interests of students, parents, and faculty. And so the responsibility is simply to advocate for them as best you can. I've been doing the advocacy work. I am 20, but I've written, I think I've written 2 bills and sponsored 2 more bills that become state law. So I understand state policy pretty well. I've worked really closely with the board. I've worked with the city. I understand the finances in a way that would allow me to be the best person to work closely and listen closely to the board and understand how the district finances are operated from the budget office. I go to the schools. I think that's the most important thing is I listen to students in a way that our board should be doing and currently is not doing. I think one of our best directors recently was Jody London. And that was because she was the board director who came to the schools and listened to the students. And the student perspectives reflected upon her policy in a way that was not matched by other board directors. Jody, and I want to follow Jody's actions. Balancing these interests, serving as a delegate, and representing are things that I've been doing for the last 6 years. And that's a lot of experience.
Thank you.
Okay, third final question we have, Kurt. What are things the district needs to do in order to improve its outcomes in math and literacy? Additionally, how can OUSD close the achievement gap among Black and brown students?
There are a number of measures to be taken and a number of measures to continue following. There are success stories that I think are real shining stars in OUSD. The AAMA African American Male Achievement Program was a success at Oakland Tech, should be funded fully and supported in every way possible. Similarly for the other targeted programs, which have improved achievement in those ways. For other steps that are needed for equity-based achievement gap closure, I support a large number of the policies in the Reparations for Black Student measure, having worked on the writing and drafting of some of those myself in previous years. And so I think adopting a number of those, working with community members and groups to target and advocate for these students in partnership with the students themselves, again, is a big component. In terms of across the board measures, I'm a strong proponent of community and parent engagement in reading and writing. Part of that is for every student. Summer reading programs benefited me, helped me to learn when I started pretty late and was able to catch up. Part of it was that my parents read to me every night. We should make sure that every student, not just the ones who can afford to have access to reading resources, are funded and supported by the district. That's just going to make it so much more equitable if every parent and every student has as many books as they want to read to their children and has the support they need for that. In terms of math, it's a lot more complicated. There have been countless working groups across the country that have been working on this issue. I was working with the state board member in Maryland on math achievement. He had some policies that were focused on essentially breaking down math into components and bringing those levels down per grade, essentially introducing more advanced concepts in a partial way to elementary, middle school students so they'd feel more prepared and more comfortable in high school. I'm supportive of algebra and pre-algebra moving lower into the grades when possible, but it's really important not to begin differentiating and having an accelerated learning program that then leaves behind students, many of them are Black and brown students, who are then left out of these, accelerated or GATE programs. OUSD did that in the past and it didn't work. And what we have to do is both ensure that there's access to advanced curriculum and resources, but more importantly, that everyone has a fair shot and that we're not using existing metrics like younger grade math performance, which is highly driven by or highly correlated with parental income, parental educational achievement, and other factors which are really, really inequitable. Instead, we have to look at the ways that we can control and cancel out the biases that are caused by systemic inequalities in the education system and make sure that every student has a fair shot into getting into these programs and every student can get into these programs.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes for follow-ups.
All right.
Megan, do you have a follow-up question to ask?
No, people in the room can go first, I feel.
What do you think of yours?
I'll go ahead and ask a question. Ben, you are entering this race where you are not the teachers union's selected choice candidate, and they will be actively working to not just elect their chosen candidate, but ensure that you do not get into office. If and when you are elected, how will you create alliances, partnerships, and strong working relationships beyond what occurred or happened on the campaign trail?
The responsibility of a board member is to listen and represent every constituent, and that includes teachers in the teachers union. I have worked in great lengths with people who disagree ideologically from me. In Oakland, we are comparatively ideologically homogenous, especially when looking at state and federal politics. But, on tribal issues, Republicans in Congress have been really strong advocates that I've supported and worked with, simply because issues bring us all together. I hope to bring that experience and that working relationship of just being an open listener who doesn't make any pledges, doesn't sign any issues, but ensures that they're accessible and available whenever. When all city council with Jessica, we listened to everyone. Frankly, we were kids. We didn't have the opportunity to ignore any perspective simply because we were closed out of most spaces. But working in all city council taught me how important it is to ensure that everyone respects you as an individual and respects you enough to consult you on issues. And on the board, I'm going to keep doing that. I haven't signed any pledges or any things that would lock me into a stance because it is so important for me that the unions, the charter school advocates, the district advocates, parents, and students, all of them feel welcome and able and comfortable to discuss with me these issues. I'm not endorsed by the union. I'm still looking for their support. I'm still, applying for the support of every group I can, because I believe that you can get the endorsements of the unions and the charter school groups and the business groups because we all care about the same issue, and that's student success. Why should we argue that these individual groups are in opposition when in fact we're all trying to collaborate? And if we can get every person at the table having a conversation and reaching a compromise, then that's the best option possible. And I want to do that every time, because consensus building is like the #1 goal.
Thanks.
Maybe actually we have time for 2 more follow-ups here.
Yeah, if elected, how will you deal with board disruptions, disagreements with the board, with different board directors? How would you handle that?
By board disruptions, do you mean disagreements within the board or between the board and the general population?
Both.
Okay, well, those are definitely very different issues. As an individual who's only been on one side of that dynamic, I can't speak to my history with, inter-board relationships. But what I can say is that I want to develop a really strong and really positive relationship built on trust and mutual respect on the board. I fully expect to be on the opposite side of many issues with the members of the board. That's kind of the responsibility because I am an advocate for some people and they are an advocate for other people simply because of our districts. It is, we as the board works best when there is disagreement because that means there are different perspectives being heard. And the most important thing is, which has been successfully implemented in the previous 2 years, is to ensure that the dialogue is distinct from the personal relationships of the board members. So on the board, I would continue that. Respectful dialogue, communication, and frankly, going out after that and all collectively rooting for the Oakland Roots together, or griping about the Oakland A's, or these issues that bring us all together, because those can be completely distinct things. In terms of board constituent issues, I sincerely hope that open dialogue and an open office policy will prevent a number of those issues that occurred, because I know that a lot of the board strife was caused by a perceived lack of engagement, and in some ways a real lack of engagement with community groups. So by stemming that, by going out into the community preemptively and having these conversations, I hope people feel heard. And I hope that their perspectives are reflected in my own votes. Even when I don't agree with the issue, I'm still planning to vote for things that my constituents support or that the board and the district recommend, because my job is to simply serve for the best interest of students and not for my own personal perspectives. So I think coming into this and making sure that I am perceived and I actually act in a way that is respectful and responsible and generally impartial, except for student well-being, will help that everyone works collectively and hopefully has a lot of fun.